Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It'll just be a few moments. Just wondering, is the video still going? Getting a question here. Okay. Just what's being displayed for some reason isn't what's expected, but that's fine. We will continue. It'll just be another minute and then we'll get started. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Welcome. This is the 30th installment of my weekly virtual office hour address. This people will continue to say that they appreciate these weekly sessions with the mayor. And they say that that during shelter in place it's been difficult. It's for everybody, and seeing the mayor on a weekly basis. It used to be in a coffee shop, but now you know, it's through a Facebook live stream. It's a great way for me to give you updates, answer some questions, of course, and then provide some words of encouragement. People say that this has become a standard, portion of their week of meeting with the mayor. So thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale during these ever-changing and extraordinary times that we are in. I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe and healthy. Please take care of yourself. We're heading into fall now, so we're having those foggy days, shorter days definitely. The sun isn't rising as early as it was, and definitely as you're seeing people not being able to be out as much because from a rainy season, it's just around the corner, and so we've had some foggy and rainy days over the last week. It's physically and mentally stressful for people, but we will get through this. I have faith in everyone in our city, uh, and keep following the county health orders. People, you can do your part to stop the spread of this virus. You know, wash your hands, don't touch your face, reduce the number of people that you come in contact with on a daily basis, maintain safe social distancing when you're out, and of course, wear your mask. It helps. It's definitely, and it's mandatory from a county standpoint. If you need a mask, and as I've said multiple times before, if you need a face covering, reach out to me. I do have some that have been donated to me, and I'll be happy to share the wealth. That to me is critical. Wearing a mask is, I think, one of the best things you can do. We're not out of the woods yet, and you can be a carrier of the virus, or meet somebody that's asymptomatic that's not showing any symptoms, and the mask is your best protection from that. And from a just being a good neighbor, it's the best thing that you can do when you're out and about, to make sure that you don't get infected. And then of course it's soon to be flu season, so not notwithstanding COVID-19, it will be flu season. So go get your flu shot. That's very important. But wearing your mask, being safe. I think washing your hands. I think people's consciousness is at least a little has been raised a little bit, and so hopefully this flu season won't be as bad as we might be. But the whole concept of a twindemic, of having COVID-19 and then people with the flu, is a big worry when I talk to a lot of people in the healthcare industry as well as county health. We are now 207 days after the March 16th public health order that started the shelter in place, attempting to slow the spread of COVID-19. And since that declaration, a lot's happened. More happens every day. I have daily press conferences or seminars to watch, conference calls to confer or advocate in your behalf. But it's a busy time to be the mayor, but it's actually we are making progress. I've been raising your issues with county health, and they are listening, and they are we are moving forward. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what's happened at the federal, at the state, at the county, and of course the city level over the last week or so. First, last Wednesday, the state issued a basically an update on their COVID metrics, and it really, it was, as opposed to just the counts, and so they were basically previously looking at just the number of incidents of COVID and monitoring that. They're now looking at whether or not minority groups or poor people within a specific county are being tested, or being infected more than others. And so counties must invest in testing, contact tracing, outreach, and services in basically the communities most in need in the counties. And so that went into effect October 6th. And since then, there are 4 counties that thought they might be moving into a new tier, that because they aren't doing enough testing, because their their minority and poor portions of the county have a higher incidence rate, that means that they won't be moving forward. So that went in place on the 6th, but that was announced last Wednesday. And then, of course, last Thursday, Governor Newsom issued a new executive order uh, requiring basically banning new gas vehicles within 15 years. He directed state regulators to come up with a ban for sale of new gas-powered passenger cars and trucks by 2035. And this is a big push from to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and by 35%. It does need EPA approval, and for to end the sales of internal combustion engine cars within the state. In California has normally been granted Clean Air Act waivers in the past. But in order to tackle transportation related emissions that account for the largest majority of planet warming greenhouse gases, this is a big stake in the ground that the governor did. So we'll see where this goes in the next year or so, and how the state legislators look at implementing this. There was previously a state bill that was calling for this, that when they started working with the unions, the auto dealers, the different sales and chambers within different portions of the city, kind of the setting up what those measures would be became, let's say, problematic. And with this year's COVID-19 issues of trying to get things through the legislation through the state legislator, it wasn't seen as possible. So from that standpoint, we'll see how quickly the state legislators pick this up come 2021. And then let's see, on Monday of this week, Governor Newsom focused on kind of the same sort of things that we have been focusing on, mainly the wildfires. The August complex fire just surpassed 1 million acres, and that's the largest recorded fire in California. And then it's actually larger than all the fires in California between 1932 and 1999. So this has really been a very bad fire season from that standpoint. The governor touched on COVID, as he always does. During the last 7 days, California averaged a little over 3,000 COVID-19 test cases per day, and so it's down significantly from where we were earlier this summer. So that's a good thing. People are trying to do the right thing and be safe, but so we are still seeing cases, and we'll talk about the county case count a little bit later. And then on Monday afternoon, it was a big event. Santa Clara County Health and the county supervisors had a big press conference, and so they announced that we're preparing for indoor dining of restaurants and indoor gatherings at places of worship later this month. And so indoor gatherings would be limited, and indoor gatherings, restaurants, and movies would be limited to 100 people or 25% capacity, whichever is lower. And so this has been an ongoing discussion with the county supervisors, especially for the last 3 weeks. I've been really pushing for them to set up what the directives will be for indoor dining, because officially about 3 weeks ago, we moved from purple tier into the red tier, and the red tier actually allowed for indoor gatherings and indoor restaurants, but the county wasn't ready to do that. And so about a week ago, just over a week ago, San Francisco opened indoor dining, New York City opened indoor dining, and so this has been an ongoing topic of discussion with the county health and they were listening, and so on Monday they basically said that as we move into the next tier, so we're so that was expected to happen next week, and so it's looking at what the infection rates are over a given period. Um, they think that we will be moving from the red tier into the orange tier next Tuesday, so October 13th. And so what they're basically saying is when we move into the orange tier the day after, which would be, as early as Wednesday, October 14th, we will start allowing those indoor activities. So dining, going to the movies, attending religious services, they still pose a very high risk of spreading COVID-19. People do need to wear their masks as much as possible, and it's a little bit easier for for religious gatherings, for movies. But from a restaurant standpoint, taking your mask off and eating is critical. And so, but that being said, with the rainy season coming, with it getting cold, it is a big question as far as, you don't want to start laying off um, some of the service staff that have come back. A lot of the restaurants have expanded to al fresco dining, but if people aren't showing up, if they're not, if it's rainy, they want to be able to continue and not lay those people off. And I think that's been a big thing. So as we move, hopefully in from the red to the orange tier next week, conceivably on Wednesday, we will be allowing indoor dining from a county standpoint. So that's good news. And I have heard from people that are very afraid that they don't feel that they want to eat inside of a restaurant yet until there's a vaccine, until things are proven to be more safe. And there is a risk, absolutely. That's one of the things that the county supervisors and county health have been pushing. If there's a spike in infections, we could easily move back, from orange back into red, and conceivably back into purple if things get really bad. So that that is pretty important from a being practicing safe, social distance, continuing to wear your mask as much as possible is really important. Okay. Oh, and kind of on that note, last Saturday at the market, so I'm doing market with the mayor to kick off the campaign and have people, ask their questions and meet the mayor and pick up lawn signs and buttons and such. I did actually meet the manager of the AMC theater. He came by, and they put in. So the AMC theater was actually supposed to open March 30th, so about 2 weeks after the COVID-19 shelter-in-place started. So that was their target date at that point. In the interim, following AMC's kind of nationwide directives as far as being safe, they've put in lots of measures as far as cleaning, as far as separation, as far as trying to make sure that that experience is as safe as possible. And so they're working to open up whenever they can after the county opens, after the county basically declares that indoor dining at restaurants and gatherings and movie theaters can happen. So we'll see how quickly that they can, do that grand opening, but it looks like that is upcoming. We're not sure the date yet, but stay informed. They put in a lot of effort for protection measures, and so hopefully that will be going smoothly. And a lot of people have been waiting to have that theater in their city, in our city for a long time now. And then on Wednesday, Governor Newsom signed a new executive order. So he's been writing a lot of executive orders. This one also related to climate change, but this was basically a focus to protect nearly a third of California's land and coastal waters in a long-term effort for climate change and a lot of the recent record-breaking wildfires. So he had directed state agencies to pursue actions to remove, basically climate warming carbon in from the atmosphere, so looking at carbon sequestration. And then the other thing, of course, is targeting to basically conserve 30% of the state's land and coastal waters. And this is, he did this at a walnut orchard, which is kind of an interesting press conference to say the least. But California officials currently say that about 22% of the state, that's 23 million acres, is already protected. So we need to get about 11% more to basically target the land percentage. And then about 16% of the state waters are marine protected areas. So according to the Ocean Protection Council. So from that standpoint, definitely, there's a lot of work to be done, and it's figuring out what areas we can do that in. It's streamlining that approval process for land restoration projects, protection of native plants and animals from invasive species, and then of course reinvigorating the population of pollinating insects. And we redid our backyard last year with basically California native plants, and the number of insects, the number of lizards that have appeared in the backyard is amazing. We have tons of bees, we have tons of hummingbirds, and we did milkweed for the butterflies. We had tons of monarchs this year. We've had several cocoons hatch. So it's actually been a pretty interesting year. All you have to do is plant and grow, and wildlife will find that. But it's ultimately to reach that goal of carbon neutrality by 2045. And so whatever we can do to capture more carbon from the atmosphere, to be greener, to help our wildlife, that's a great goal for everyone to do, especially from a state standpoint. So that was one of the main targets from a state standpoint of Governor Newsom this week. There weren't as many press conferences. For the last 2 days, I've been in continual seminars for the California League of Cities. So it's hearing best practices from around the state, talking about issues. So it's actually been very good from that standpoint. Let's go ahead and to move to what's upcoming. So tomorrow, of course, it's election season, so I'll be at the farmers market again tomorrow. As I said, I was dropped by for a yard sign, a campaign button, pick up some literature, get the word out. Visit larryformayor.com to sign up. Sign up for, you can have a lawn sign delivered. Not having as many meet and greets through Zoom right now. Actually, my days are filled with Zoom anyway. But tell your neighbors, send forward email. So sign up, and you can get an email that you can then forward to your friends and neighbors to have them to basically sign up and vote for their mayor. I've been doing a very difficult job for the last 20 months, or for the last about 20 months, and hopefully I can continue working for you. And then upcoming on Tuesday night, council will meet on several items. It's going to be a very busy night. First, there's a study session starting at 5:30 p.m. and ultimately we will be talking about Department of Public Safety's policies and practices. So we've had a series of 5 Unity events, and so these 5 listening Zoom events were kind of focused generally. There was a general event, a youth event, an LGBTQ event, a Spanish-speaking event, and then there's one on just general with the general public safety practices, talking with the chief and the deputy chiefs on their experiences outside of our agency as well as inside of our agency. So I think it'll be an interesting report back on what we've done in the last 4 months under shelter in place, post all the things that have happened with a racial justice standpoint, and I've been pretty proud about how our public safety has responded, how we've, for one thing, stopped the carotid hold, released a whole bunch of information on officer-involved shootings as well as complaints against our officers. So it'll be an interesting discussion. Please join that if you get a chance. And then there'll be, lots of things on the agenda that night. One of which is to authorize the city to issue bonds for up to 160 million for the Civic Center project. And so, there's been some great news that as far as the estimation of how much that the Civic Center is going to cost, it's actually about 50 million less than what was initially expected. So, our architect came in with what an architect and engineer came in with what the bid it was, and we got our series of bids from developments from the developers, and they came through from construction standpoint, and the lowest qualified bid was $50 million less than what was expected. So that's good. And to go out for bonds, it's actually a great time to go out for bonds. So from an interest rate standpoint, and how much of those bonds we actually utilize will be a question, but ultimately we can get very good rates right now as far as funding city operation and funding that civic center. The other big thing, which I've been talking about for weeks now, is the draft 2020 housing strategy and an implementation schedule. So this was kicked off about 3 years ago to talk about housing within the city, and this was looking at all types of housing from the mobile homes community to apartments to single family neighborhoods, and what can be done to one thing, looking at different measures. One is to protect at-risk affordable senior housing, preserve our mobile home communities, and I think that's been important. Promote age-friendly housing, and adopt to how we age in place in our community, and kind of some of that might be through ADUs. I've been talking to multiple seniors that have decided to build ADUs on their property, and so build a small unit in the rear of their single family home, and then basically downsize to that unit and rent out their front house that they've lived in through most of life. So they can then stay in their neighborhoods, but still have an income from renting out their front house, which might end up being, go to a family with kids that really, likes being in Sunnyvale and would like to go to our schools. Looking at, whether or not we could increase inclusionary percentages, how we promote those ADUs. There's lots of things from that standpoint. So lots of different options that council will be looking at, from tenant protections to even safe RV parking. So there'll be a lot of things that we'll talk about from that standpoint. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people that want to speak. So that will be one of the first items. We'll also get our first quarterly budget update. So when we basically kicked off and approved the 2020-2021 budget, we did a lot of difficult cuts. We went a little bit deeper than even what staff was proposing to try to make sure that we had appropriate runway, that we didn't have to go into basically some of our reserves as much as we might have to. And this is our first update. So far, we've had a lot of positive information as far as, at least from as far as property tax is concerned. And in looking at what's been released so far, there's positive year-end revenue from the end of last year. So we did have, what our estimates were. We did have money left over for what we expected to spend from the general fund. So that's been very positive. But that's our first, update from a financial standpoint as far as this year's budget is concerned. The other thing we will be doing is talking about approving participation in the Bay Area Quality Management District, Spare the Air, Cut the Commute Pledge. And so, with so many people sheltering in place, the air has gotten better, traffic isn't as bad, and we're looking at ways. So I've been working with Supervisor Chavez and transportation leaders from MTC, Caltrain, Samtrans, different organizations around the Bay Area for the last 3 months, and came up with a Cut the Commute pledge. Basically, it's pushing cities and businesses that if they can, for those employees that can, having them pledge that those employees that could do remote work would do remote work 25% of the time. So 1 or 2 days out of the week, stay at home. Don't commute to work. When you're commuting to work, definitely use public transportation, use car share, use active transportation if you can, but trying to basically cut the commute as much as possible. And we've done that from a city standpoint. And so this is just taking that pledge and saying that we will try to do that wherever we can, and setting that good example to our businesses. And then let's see what else that's mainly it. We can talk about the next council meeting where we get into a few other items, which is so this coming Tuesday's council meeting is the items I just talked about. On the 13th, on the 27th, we'll finally get into the REACH codes, and we've been talking about REACH codes and improving, what the requirements are from a city standpoint to on new building, and what requirements we have as far as all electric, solar panels, all that. What's the EV charger percentage for multi-family residences? All those sorts of things. Those will be picked up at the meeting on the 27th. So let's go ahead and get to the county health dashboard. From a state standpoint, it continues to go up over 800,000 cases. Things are looking, and that's dropping, but from a county standpoint, we are now at 22,154 cases. That's up about 700 last week, so we've maintained kind of a steady number. We've had 354 deaths. That's about an increase of 20 since last week. So there have been quite a few deaths in the last week, and hospitalizations are down from 87 last week to 74 this week. And then as far as COVID-19 cases within different cities, San Jose still is a big number with 14,567. That's up about 450 from last week, which is about the same, 350, 450 over the last few weeks. Sunnyvale itself has had we're now over 1,000 cases of COVID since all this began, and we've had 1,037. That's up 70 since last week. So we've had a little bit of a uptick, but we've stayed in about the 40 through 70 number for a few weeks now. So we're averaging about the same, but we've had a slight uptick in the last week or two. And then I continue to do advocating on your behalf, at the county level especially. I've continued my weekly discussions with the county health department, with the county supervisors. We already talked about indoor dining, and that was, that took a lot of effort. County health is still very, let's say very hesitant to open up indoor dining. That being said, it is being done safely elsewhere, and it is important from a let's say fiscal standpoint for all these different businesses that have moved outdoors, and the rainy seasons are coming. From a pop-up van standpoint, from a county health testing standpoint, we have successfully had them to commit to continue testing twice a month, normally the second and fourth Mondays at Murphy Park. Of course, the second Monday, next Monday, is a holiday, at least from a county standpoint, not from a city standpoint. So it's Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day. From a city standpoint, we don't take that holiday, but that means that what would normally be testing next Monday at Murphy Park is moved to next Friday. So a week from today, October 16th, from I think 9 to 4 or so, you'll be able to be tested. They have changed the appointments, so it is all it's all done by reservation. Although they will allow a few drop-ins depending upon what their bandwidth is. But they have increased the appointment setup from 3 days to 7 days. So that appointment sign up will go live today for next Friday. So definitely get a chance, or maybe tomorrow, depending on how they're looking at the days. But you should be able to go to sccfreetest.org to get to find Sunnyvale or find any of the other locations around the county where you can go and get tested. And then I've heard that some of our healthcare providers have been a little more, let's say, responsive to responding back to what people have been saying is it's been jumping through hoops in order to actually get people to approve, or get people approved to actually do testing, get a COVID-19 test. And so I've heard that's been a little bit better. And so the county, we talked about that a few weeks ago. The county put measures in place to basically fine healthcare providers if they're not providing a test when it's requested by people that are covered. And that's a big thing, that they were worried about running out of tests for so long. But if they're not using those tests, they're just sitting there. People that want to get tested, that think that they might be exposed, and especially as we're moving into restaurants, if you're sick, you shouldn't be in a restaurant. If you're exhibiting symptoms, you shouldn't be in a restaurant. But if you think you've been exposed, definitely go out and get tested. And whether or not that's a free test from the county, or going to your healthcare provider and say that you need to get tested. With that, let's go ahead and get to some of the weekly questions. And there's been a lot of questions this week, so let's go through them. What's happening with the playground? So this has been an ongoing question. About 3 weeks ago, we opened playgrounds, 4 playgrounds in the city. Let's see, Lakewood, Braley, Las Palmas, and Ortega parks were open, and we've been monitoring that. And that was, the county had updated at the beginning of September what their orders were as far as what signage was needed, as well as kind of what the appropriate measures were. Before that, they had something on their website basically saying that all the playground equipment needed to be cleaned down after every use, and that was pretty much impossible. But the signage went up at Lakewood, Braley, Las Palmas, and Ortega that people should maintain safe social distance. People should wear a mask. The most important thing, children should sanitize their hands before and after using the playground equipment. It's not really feasible to clean down all that equipment multiple times a day. But other cities in the meantime, have followed suit. So Mountain View and Santa Clara just opened up a lot of their playgrounds in the last week, and we made the decision earlier this week that we'll be opening up all the rest of the playgrounds. That being said, it's still a effort, and they want to go out and make sure that to basically evaluate all the playgrounds, do some basic cleaning, put up the appropriate signage. So there's a lot that needs to go on before they're fully open, but those should be opening up in the next week or two. Another question I've had, at least from one person, is what's happening with the census. So the census was supposed to stop on September 30th. There were all kinds of lawsuits, but it was finally ruled that it will go on until October 31st. And so if you haven't filled out the census, if you know of anyone who hasn't filled out the census, please have them do that. For me, it's the easiest thing you can do to make sure that our city gets appropriate funds, because a lot of the federal funding and some of the state funding is all based upon those census numbers. And so no matter what interim numbers, currently we think we have about 155,000 people in the city. But no matter what, evaluation we have as far as the number of people in the city, it's all based upon those census numbers as far as what kind of funding we get. And currently we have 78.5% of the households that that have responded. That's up from 2010 when it was 74.6%. So we're better before, and we're better than Santa Clara that's at 77.5. We're better than San Jose that's 76.9%. That being said, that there are certain cities that are over 80%. So it's really important. You know, they've extended that deadline. If you haven't filled out the census, go to my2020census.org. Sorry, .gov. It's a gov. My2020census.gov to sign up, or go to 844-333-2020, and you can sign up, fill out your census. Please do that. You know, it's really important. What's happening with Sunnyvale elections? Is voting safe? So people started receiving their ballots this week, and hopefully you are signed up and registered to vote. There are 3 people running for mayor, 3 people in District 2, which is downtown, 2 people running in District 4, which is on the east side of Sunnyvale, and 3 people running in District 6, which is the north part of Sunnyvale. And so there's been a series of forums and endorsement interviews. Posted, you know, several of those forums online on the Facebook feed, so you should be able to find those. If you want to support my campaign, you know, first go to larryformayor.com and sign up. That's the important thing. You know, donate, get the word out, take a lawn sign, request buttons, whatever you want to do. Getting that word out with your friends and neighbors is really critical. And then, of course, you know, as far as is it safe, definitely voting is safe. You know, there's been some questions about, you know, people worried about election delays. Well, definitely get your ballot in as early as possible. Everyone should be getting a mail-in ballot, but there are places to drop off your ballot. So there's a ballot box at the, you know, at the library, at the senior center or community center, at several Sunnyvale Community Services. There's several places within the city that have ballot boxes. And then there are ultimately 22 days, so opening up in the next few days, 22 locations, 11 days, 22 locations that will be opening within the county 11 days. So it's somewhere in the county 11 days before election day that you can go to. So you can go to those to drop off your ballot and turn that in, to conceivably get a replacement ballot if something is wrong, or conceivably sign up to vote. If you aren't signed up to vote, you can go directly to a voting center, and you can go to the county offices now and do that. But one of the things that'll be easy is there'll be several parks within the city that will have, you know, that'll be open for voting, and so I'll be announcing those when they open. And then over 80% of the votes are returned by mail. So if you want to turn those in, you can, as long as your ballot is postmarked by November 3rd. Everything is fine. And then basically the post office or the county registrar is allowing that to go 17 days through the system. So they should receive it within 17 days to make sure that your ballot is counted. So, and then there's other reviews that go through, but I think, you know, there'll be 90 drop boxes throughout the county. There'll be, you know, it'll be actually, it's very safe, but good, you know, dropping off at a voting center. And I think, you know, within our city, it'll at least be Washington Park and Fair Oaks Park, and I think maybe one other location. But as soon as those have been finalized, as soon as I have that information, I'll tell you. But it's, you know, get out the vote. It's really important for everyone. Important for you to elect your candidates and make your voice known as far as state measures and local measures. It's really important. Question: when is Whole Foods opening? So as I've said before, it was planned for the beginning of November. I've heard rumor that it might be as early as the end of October. So definitely things are looking good as far as Whole Foods is concerned. So keep you know, keep watching. Hopefully there will be good news as far as that's concerned. Let's see. What other questions? Oh, is Sunnyvale safe? So there were several incidences this week that gathered a lot of information. It's between a stabbing that happened in Baylands Park about 3 weeks ago that we're still looking for information on the suspect. There was a potential home invasion that looks like they're still doing information on that, but it was somebody that was knocking on the door late at night, and there that's an open investigation right now. There were several other things. Ultimately, so I've been talking to the chief of public safety as well as the city manager. Property crimes and violent crimes are way down, and there was actually a report released last week that Sunnyvale, and there's different reports. We're normally in the top 10 safest cities based upon size, and we've been that way for the last at least 6 or 7 years, and often the safest city. So we're in the top 10 normally of the cities of our size around the nation, and we're listed as the second safest city in California. So we're doing very well as far as that's concerned. In my discussions with the chief of public safety, property crimes between January and September are down 12% compared to last year between that same period. So for 2019, between January and September, we're down 12% for property crimes, and violent crimes were down 15%. So I know that people, a lot of people are saying that they're worried. That being said, we've had fewer crimes under COVID-19 that people have been worried about. One of the questions is Halloween canceled in Sunnyvale? Well, so I talked about this last week. About 2 weeks ago, County Health issued guidelines for Halloween, and so Halloween is not canceled. It all depends on what risk factors you're willing to take. And so in general, local health officials highly recommend community members participate in very low risk activities to celebrate Halloween and Dia de los Muertos this year, and hopefully, there won't be parties. One of the big things is Halloween's on a Saturday this year, so normally that would be a big party Halloween day, but try to do low risk activities. Stay at home, keep it small. Do pumpkin carving with your household members. Visit an outdoor pumpkin patch and wear your mask. You have a virtual costume contest. Dress up your house. Participate in kind of vehicle-based gatherings. But I think the big thing is try to reduce. Try to stay within your bubble, and I think that's one of the best things you can do as far as reducing the risk as much as possible. The pet parade, and so ultimately there was supposed to be a Sunnyvale pet parade on Halloween this year, and so that pet parade is not happening because everyone needs to be safe, socially distanced. That being said, that is moving virtual also. So, and they'll have family competition and pet competition as far as dressing up your pets. So I'll post that link as far as the pet parade is concerned, so people can get more information about that. I'll be kicking that off with a short video with some of other community leaders, and then that's so very low risk. And then there's moderate risk. If you really must participate, you can do grab and go bags on a table at the end of your driveway or something of that nature. So kids can come by and pick up masks, and wash your hands, wear gloves when you're when you're wrapping up that candy and putting it out. So there's things that you can do to prevent that risk of how you pass out candy. And everyone needs to be wearing a face mask if you're out, and physically distancing as much as possible. And then you could also, conceivably participate in very small, you and a few neighbors doing socially distanced pumpkin carving in a backyard or something. So there's a few things that you can have, small open air events, but Halloween is not the normal Halloween that we'd expect. Other questions I got. Um, let's see. What's happening with the Sunnyvale Reach Code? So that will be coming to Sunnyvale on um, on October 26th. No, October 28th. So that will be there. Other questions? Are you going to talk? Oh, what are you going to do about diners being accosted by Black Lives Matters protesters in downtown Sunnyvale? So, I was monitoring that protest very closely. As far as I saw, there were people on both sides being um, um, belligerent, and I was not happy with either of those sorts of things. I wasn't happy with some of the language that the protesters used. There is a certain right to protest, and you have your First Amendment rights to say to basically speak, but there were definitely that got out of hand. Public safety was monitoring the situation to make sure that things didn't happen more, but I was not really happy with some of the events that happened during that on Murphy Avenue. Um, let's see. Other comments? Yeah, and yeah, so I see other comments on that same sort of thing. You know, I do I did agree that it was important for them, and this is kind of I marched when people met at Redwood Square and we went to City Hall, and so I think that was a very safe protest. Public safety was informed, and public safety was informed with the short march from Murphy Park to downtown Murphy Avenue, but I wasn't happy that it ended up on Murphy Avenue and basically disturbed people that were enjoying alfresco dining there. That being said, you know, it's an important issue. The protesters were there, basically making sure that trying to make sure that people don't forget the issue, and I think that it is, it's an important issue. That's one of the reasons why we had our unity events, to hear back from our residents. And I think, from a public safety standpoint, our public safety did a good job as far as monitoring the issue, monitoring what was happening, and making sure that people were generally safe and not being, let's say, uh, what I've seen in other cities being, overbearing, much like what happened back in June, making sure that streets were closed safely, that we were able to cross Matilda and go to City Hall, and that it was a safe gathering at City Hall. Let's see. And are we going to withhold permits from this group until they agree to follow the law? A lot of these marches, that appear don't have permits. So there is, legal, you can do some assembly. There wasn't a permit for like a moving parade. Um, but definitely I've been, talking to some of the people that were part of that and trying to make sure that, it's how it affects our residents, I think is pretty important at the end of the day. It's there is that balance of making sure that people have their right to protest and speak, and then it's also important to talk about what how you affect those, and it is a wake up call, but it's also how you treat those around you. And so it's making sure that you balance both of that, all of that. Um, One of the questions: council is thinking of protecting mobile home residents from park owners raising the rent exorbitantly. There is concern that MOUs will not protect. So, as a council member, you can't have an official decision before you get on council, before you see the items. So I will not say how I'm going to vote on Tuesday night, because I need to get the rest of the testimony from residents and all that. Definitely, I think that there is a balance between MOUs and ordinances, and I think that one is a lot more binding, and I think has a lot more protections. So we'll see how what staff's presentation is, and most importantly, what the majority of council thinks. This is always the thing, from a council standpoint, and people are like, how are you going to vote on this or that? Well, it is kind of interesting, because if you actually declare, I will vote this way on this issue, you actually need to recuse yourself, because you need to keep an open mind. And for those, those council members or candidates that said, I will vote for this or that, they need to basically be very careful, because, ultimately we've had to actually have council members recuse themselves in the past because for what they've said in a public forum, whether or not that's at a candidate forum or on their website. You have to keep an open mind, and that's one of the things that's important from your council members, that you need to hear all the testimony. Staff writes these long reports, we get emails and phone calls and all that, and then we take public testimony during the night of the item coming to council. And what's really critical is we keep an open mind. We hear, what that testimony is, and then we figure out what we think is the best way forward for the city of Sunnyvale, for the quality of life of our residents. And that's really important. And and that's one of the things, that you have 7 council members, and you have differing views on what that final decision should be. So we'll see where the final motions are at the end of the day, and conceivably, what the schedule is, what the vote is from a council standpoint. So please tune in on Tuesday night as far as that's concerned, and I'll give you an update next week for those of you that aren't able to actually attend. Any update on COVID test availability for this weekend or next week? And so, yes, I went through that very quickly. You can get tested in Sunnyvale at Murphy Park next Friday, all day long. You can. It's all by reservation, although they do take a certain number of drop-ins. So definitely just drop by and you can get tested. And then there's testing going on continuously at 2 locations in Mountain View, and then several of our healthcare providers. El Camino Hospital is providing free tests for people in the district. So definitely go get tested if you've been exposed, if you need to get tested. Okay. So let's see. And I think that's it. We're pretty much almost at 10 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and wrap up. It's been a busy week, and I thank you for joining me again this week. As always, I'm proud of Sunnyvale's response. It's been a long haul as far as that's concerned, but we responded very well to the pandemic. I hear great things about what residents have done to help out their neighbors, and I know it can be difficult. New issues come up every week, but your response can make a difference in other people's lives. People are raising donations for the shelter, for the residents at our shelter. People are helping out some of the homeless, and or just sharing baked goods with their neighbors, mowing their neighbor's lawn, sharing fruit that they picked from their tree, writing chalk messages, or putting messages in their window. So from our standpoint, continue to do that. Continue to build community, especially during these times. It's difficult for so many, but people continue to help their neighbors, help strangers. You know, if you're out on a walk, wave, say hello from a safe social distance. People miss that social interaction. Uh, Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We are all in this together. We'll get through this together. So thanks for listening. Until next week, stay safe, wear your mask, have a good weekend, and drop by the farmer's market tomorrow if you want to say hi. Okay, take care. Until next week, stay safe. Bye.